Shalom and welcome, everybody. Tonight, right now, this time is a time of mourning for the Jewish people. Men aren't shaving. Young couples aren't going out to movies or concerts. People are walking a little bit slower, thinking a little bit longer. We're mourning the 24,000 students that passed away, Rabbi Akiva's students. The Talmud teaches us that they died because they didn't treat each other with the proper respect. Tonight, all of us have gathered here tonight to rectify the sin of that generation. We've come together to remember, to acknowledge, and to honor the soldiers of the Israeli Defense Forces who gave their lives for our freedom, who gave their lives for our safety. We're here to pay our respect to all of the innocent people in Israel that lives were taken from them by terrorists. They were living out their Jewish destiny here in our homeland, and their life was ended short by murderers. Tonight, all of Israel mourns. Tonight is Yom HaZikaron, Israel Memorial Day.
In Israel, Yom HaZikaron is very unique. We not only remember our brave soldiers who are not with us today, but we also remember the innocent men, women, and children who were brutally murdered, who were brutally taken away from us for no reason other than the fact that they're Jews living in the land of Israel. You know, I've traveled throughout the United States to Jewish communities, and I always feel this overwhelming love for Israel among Jews I meet everywhere. And many times Jews come up to me and they say, I love Israel so much. If there's a war, I'm on the next plane. I'll go, I'll fight for Israel, I'll die for Israel. And while this commitment and this devotion is so important and it's really beautiful, we don't need more Jews to die for Israel. We need more Jews to live for Israel. Nothing strengthens Israel more than the Jewish people returning to Israel, establishing families, making their lives. Nothing strengthens Israel more than the Jewish people coming home. In that way, every Jew in Israel, from civilian to soldier, man, woman, and child, are on the front lines of the battle for the Jewish state. Terrorists don't differentiate between soldiers and civilians. They don't differentiate between an Israeli tank and a school bus of kindergarten children. They want to destroy the Jewish people in the land of Israel. That is why on Memorial Day, we remember every Jew who was murdered because of the fact that they are a Jew living here in Israel.
At 8 p.m. tonight, all of Israel stopped and remembered. The siren went off and blasted throughout the entire country. Cars pulled on the side of the road and the drivers exited their vehicles. Classes were stopped and the students stood up in place. Everyone that was involved in their routine or their daily activities took a stop and stood in somber silence, just as Aaron HaKohen did, Aaron, our high priest, when he heard that his two sons had passed. When I hear the siren in Jerusalem, I try not to hear a horn. I try to hear the sound of a shofar, one solid shofar that reverberates throughout the entire country. One cry of all of the pain that the Jewish people have suffered. One cry that goes out to the entire world, and that cry that goes up to Shamayim. All of us crying, saying, how many more children need to die? Whether they're 11 years old or whether they're 18 years old in the army. How much longer will we tolerate terrorism in our country? Every Jew that lives in Israel, every Jew that visits Israel, knows that there might be another war. They know that there might be another intifada, and yet still we choose to make our lives here with such dedication. There might be a war. There might be an intifada. All of us deep down know there's going to be another war. And there's going to be another intifada. And yet still, all of us have chosen to make our lives here. Every Jew that lives here knows that Israel is worth fighting for, knows that Israel is worth sacrificing for, because Israel is our home. Israel is our only home. Every Jew that's been killed by terrorists has given his life for that dream, for our home. And tonight, we take the time to remember those that have passed and those that have been taken from us before their time.
We're honored to have with us here tonight Sherry Mandel, whose son, Kobe, almost 7 years ago, he was 13, and he was brutally murdered. Everybody loved Kobe Mandel. He was magnetic. He loved life. He loved learning. He was kind and he was affectionate and he was compassionate. He loved Torah. He loved the land of Israel. He was known for his love of the land of Israel. He told so many of his friends that he wanted to know the Judean hills behind his home like the back of his hand. On May 8th, 2001, Kobe and his dear friend Yosef went on a hike in the wadi outside behind his home. They didn't come back that night, and the search parties went looking, and after a number of hours they found Kobe and Yosef, who were brutally bludgeoned to death, whose skulls were crushed and their bodies were mutilated beyond recognition. They could only be identified by their dental records. The terrorists had dipped their hands in the boy's blood and smeared it all over the cave. Yosef and Kobe are our brothers, are our sons, they're our family. So please, join us as we remember Kobe, from the joyous day of his birth to his tragic and horrific, untimely death.
שתישאר צעיר לנצח, לה 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 שתישאר צעיר לנצח. שישמור אותך אל ויגשים משאלתך, שתעשה בשביל אחר והוא למענך, שתיגע בכל כוכב ותטפס על כל שלב, שתישאר צעיר לנצח. שתגדל להיות צודק, שתדע לראות האור ולמצוא את האמת בתוך החושך הגדול, שתמיד תהיה חזק, אל תשחק את המשחק, שתישאר צעיר לנצח. לה 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 שתישאר צעיר לנצח. שיהיו ידיך עסוקות וצעדיך מהירים, שיהיה ביתך יציב מול רוחות השינויים, שבלבך תהיה שמחה, שישילו את שירך, שתישאר צעיר לנצח. שישמור אותך אל ויגשים משאלתך, שתעשה בשביל אחר והוא למענך, שתיגע בכל כוכב ותטפס על כל שלב, שתישאר צעיר לנצח. לה 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 שתישאר צעיר לנצח. לה 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 שתישאר צעיר לנצח.
Tonight, we have the honor of having Sherry Mendel with us. She's the author of Blessings of a Broken Heart, and if there's anyone that understands what a broken heart is, it's a mother that's lost her little baby. She's here tonight to share her heart with us, that we're able to really connect to the pain of Yom HaZikaron. So please, everyone, rise as we receive Sherry Mendel. Sherry, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We know that this can't be easy for you. Tell us what you go through on Yom HaZikaron. What does Yom HaZikaron mean to you?
Yom HaZikaron, for us, we have Yom HaZikaron every day. And it helps because the rest of the country remembers. And seeing this video tonight, you know, it's heartbreaking. I can't believe it's me and my son and my family, but there's thousands of people like me, and it's hard. I mean, we suffer.
You've experienced in your life more pain than any human being should ever have to, and Yom HaZikaron is such a difficult day for so many people. I remember you were saying that the night that you found out about your son Kobe, someone came and offered you sedatives, and you didn't want to take it. How do you cope with the pain? What do you do with that pain?
Yeah, the night after Kobe was murdered, somebody came to my house and she gave me a Valium, and I said, I'm not going to take this, because I just had a sense that I had to feel the pain and I had to enter it. And a lot of people, you know, they say be strong. And it's probably good on the level of the collective. But for the individual, it really can lead to more suffering, because I really believe the only way to deal with suffering is to really enter it and feel it, and then find a way to transform it and to turn it into love and to turn it into giving. But the only way you can do that is if you have enough support. And I had tremendous love and support from my family and from my community and my friends and from Israel, from Am Yisrael and the Jewish people and the Jewish people all over the world. And I think that that really is what differentiates us, because we build from pain. And it's really the story of the Jewish people, is that we really built from our pain. And we use it to create. And after the Shoah, after the Holocaust, we built the land of Israel.
You've taken such a traumatic and painful event, and you've brought such light to the world now with the Kobe Mendel Foundation. What would your advice be to people that are dealing with that pain? How did you transform it to bring such light?
Well, I think that every loss and every hard situation has something hidden in it, something that is waiting to be born from it. And it's a very hard truth, because we don't want to grow from suffering. Like, I would much rather grow from going to the beach and going to the discotheque, but that's not the way it happens. So the only way is to go in and through and find what's waiting inside of that pain and see what it teaches you and what it tells you and what's needed in the world. And we saw after Kobe's murder that our children suffered. My other kids were 12 and 10 and 6, and children are the silent victims in the families like ours, because they want to protect their parents. They don't want to, it's very hard for them to see their parents hurt. And they don't have a place for the pain, and we saw that with our own children, that we had a lot of support, our friends came over, but what's a 9-year-old girl going to say to another 9-year-old to help her? They don't have the capacity to help each other. And so we saw right away that our kids needed help, and we were able to create a camp. And we have therapy at the camp, art therapy and music therapy, but everything is fun. And the main thing about the camp that's so surprising is that it's actually the happiest place in the world.
I remember I was so inspired by a story you were telling about Burger King. Could you share that with our viewers?
Yeah, Kobe, he was killed on May 8th, 2001, and June 14th would have been his 14th birthday. And it was just a day of pure torture for me, because then it was like Kobe was still alive. I could still hear him speaking. It was, you know, I went into his room. I just couldn't believe that he was gone. It's like somebody dies, well, he was murdered. But they don't just vanish. And so, but he was gone, and I needed him, and I didn't know what to do. And my friend Shira Chernobyl told me I had to do something to mark his birthday. And we were in downtown Jerusalem, and I thought on my birthday I like to swim a mile. I thought, what am I going to do for Kobe? And then I got the idea to give charity to 14 beggars, because Kobe would have been 14. And I took out money from my pockets and I gave it to my kids. And the minute I took out the money, a beggar came to our table. And we were so happy to see him. And we gave him so much money. I mean, I think he was really shocked, because I don't think any beggar ever got such a good reception. And then we went out on the streets of Jerusalem on the Midrahov, and we went running after beggars to give them money. And we didn't find 14. It was really weird, because usually in downtown Jerusalem there's no shortage of beggars, but it was the beginning of the Intifada and it was a hot day, nobody was out. And I felt like Kobe was with us, because Kobe was very funny, he was very bright. I kept waiting for his teachers to tell me that he was a genius, because I thought he was a genius. And they didn't say it, but and I felt like he was with us, because he was so ironic. And here it was, we were begging for beggars, we were chasing them. And just when we needed them, they weren't there. And then I went home and I told my husband what had happened. And he said next year we would make a banquet for the beggars. And we did. And it became a kind of prototype of how we dealt with the pain, because the next year, I mean, even this year, Kobe would be turning 21 in June. And it's horrible, but we have something to do on that day, to go look for beggars.
With the little time that we have left, what would be your one message to all of the Jewish people around the world on Yom HaZikaron? What would you want them to know?
I think that Yom HaZikaron, to remember, you have to be animated by what you remember. It's not enough just to remember. You have to use what you remember to change the world, to make the world better, to create more love, and to bring the spirit of all those people who have died and been murdered into the world. Because, and that's really the task of the Jewish people, and that's really being a light unto the nations, that take the pain, don't be afraid to cry a river, and then cross that river and go to the other side.
Well, thank you so much for being with us.
Sherry told me a little story about the Shiva house, the house of mourning. A little boy came to her wearing glasses, and he told her a story. He said that just that week, he was in gym class with Kobe. And, you know, he wasn't such a good athlete, but Kobe was. And they were doing volleyball, you know, where you like hit the ball from one person to the other, doing volleyball practice. And he said that Kobe was there to choose first. And the boy whispers to Sherry, trying to hold back his tears, he said, he could have picked anyone, and he picked me. And I'm the worst player in the class. Rabbi Seth and Sherry Mandel, they could have succumbed to the sadness and the darkness and the depression. It must have been overwhelming. But they wanted Kobe's life to bring happiness and light into the world, as Kobe did for that little boy and for everyone who met them. Everyone who met Kobe fell in love with him. And his compassion still lives on, because in their grief they founded Camp Kobe, where children and siblings of terror victims are able to find respite and find happiness. Our rabbis tell us that phonetic sounds and letters in Hebrew contain a connection in their meaning. The word for remember is zachar, which is connected to sagar, which means to close, because when we remember something, we close it in our hearts and in our minds, and it has meaning there forever. This Yom HaZikaron, let us remember all those who died so we could be here tonight. Let us remember Kobe and his overwhelming love and excitement for Israel. Let's close Kobe in our hearts and let that love for Israel overflow into ours and strengthen our commitment and our love for Israel. May all of the people who died so we could be here tonight continue to live through us. Shalom.